good evening. It's Saturday, the 25th of October here in Korea. You are tuned in to our 10 p.m. newscast here on ARIRANG TV. Thanks for joining us. I'm Scott Thompson, filling in for Mark Broome. Our top story this evening: South Korea and the U.S. reaffirmed their united front against North Korea's nuclear program. During security talks in Washington, the chiefs of defense and foreign affairs from both countries tell North Korea that economic development will never come so long as the regime pursues nuclear development. Our Hwang Ji-hye starts us off.
The denuclearization of North Korea is what topped the agenda at security talks between South Korea and the United States. The meeting took place as Korean Foreign Minister Byung-se and Defense Minister Min-koo sat down on Friday with their U.S. counterparts, Secretary of State John Kerry and Pentagon Chief Chuck Hagel. In a joint statement after the so-called 2+2 talks, the two sides pressed North Korea to give up its nuclear program and refrain from provocations. They added that the North will fail in any effort to improve its economy so long as it's pursuing nuclear weapons. That puts pressure on Pyongyang's so-called Byung-se policy, which aims to achieve economic and nuclear development at the same time. In a press conference after the meeting, Secretary of State John Kerry said that Washington is willing to hold nuclear talks with Pyongyang, but not just for the sake of talks. Kerry added that the U.S. needs to be certain that the North is prepared to live up to its international obligations and abide by international norms of behavior. Over reducing the number of American troops stationed on the Korean Peninsula, the top U.S. diplomat said it's entirely premature to talk about the issue. This tamped down some speculation that mounted earlier this week after Kerry said the U.S. was prepared to reduce troop levels in the region as a possible concession for the North's denuclearization. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
The commander of U.S. forces in South Korea believes the North may already have the capability to produce a miniaturized nuclear warhead. U.S. Army General Curtis Scaparrotti says that North Korea has made significant advances in its technology in recent months, but added that there's zero evidence that the North has tested or even produced such a weapon. If the North gets that far, the small warhead could conceivably be placed on an intercontinental ballistic missile and launched far enough to reach America's shores. It would also make it much easier for the North to sell nuclear weapons for much needed cash. Despite being blocked once in the day, South Korean activists were successful in flying anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border this Saturday. Their first attempt in the city of Paju failed, as roads leading to the site were blocked by some 200 area residents and liberal activists who also damaged some of the balloons that were going to carry the flyers. That prompted the group to move to another location in Gimpo, where they floated some 20,000 leaflets into North Korea. The North has warned Seoul repeatedly to stop the activists or face the consequences. The two Koreas exchanged machine gun fire across their shared border 2 weeks ago after similar balloons were sent into the air. Now, not far underneath all the exchanges of gunfire and harsh rhetoric between the two Koreas are cultural ties that remain strong to this day, some 70 years after the peninsula became divided. To remember and honor those shared cultural traits and build off of them, a film festival got started this Saturday throughout the country. Park Ji-won reports.
The first film festival featuring movies from both South and North Korea begins on Saturday. Handprints of 70 renowned figures in South Korean film and related government officials were unveiled at the opening ceremony to mark the next year will be the 70th year since two Koreas were divided. The first South and North Korea film screening event is jointly hosted and supported by those in the film industry and the country's unification and culture ministries. The goal is to promote public understanding about North Korea.
As far as I know, this is the first public film screening event of North Korean films in South Korea. I believe unification can only be possible when the two Koreas share one mind. And arts and culture is the best place to start with that. I know that East and West Germany reunited in the 1990s, but they began cooperative relations in the arts sector starting in the 1970s and continued the initiative until reunification. I hope the event can be the foundation for further cross-border exchanges.
Legendary film director Im Kwon-taek was awarded the first Peace Prize of the event in recognition of his lifelong contributions to films that aim to narrow the divide between the Koreas.
I made many films depicting characters who live under constant pain due to the nation's separation. Now I want to make a new film around the theme of tearing down the psychological barriers and grudges in the minds of all Koreans. I hope the film contributes to future unification.
A total of 8 films from the two Koreas will be screened at 20 theaters across the South through the end of this month. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Add Korea's prime minister to the list of government officials calling on Japan to own up to its historical misdeeds for the sake of bettering relations. During a speech at an event for the Korea-Japan Parliamentarians Union on Saturday in Seoul, Chung Hong-won said bilateral ties would only improve once both sides made sincere efforts to heal past wounds. That, the prime minister said, depended on Tokyo's actions. Chung's remarks echo those made by other top-level Korean officials, including President Park Geun-hye, who said earlier this year that 2015 would be a new starting point for Korea-Japan ties, as it marks the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations being established between the two countries. Over to another school shooting in the United States, this time in the state of Washington, just outside of Seattle, where a high school freshman opened fire in a school cafeteria, killing 1 student and wounding 4 others. Authorities have identified the gunman as 14-year-old Jalen Freiberg. They say he took his own life after firing on fellow classmates, all of them under the age of 18, including 2 who were his cousins. 3 of the shooting victims are in critical condition. Meanwhile, in Northern California, a total of 4 shootings, all involving 1 suspect who has now been apprehended. A 6-hour manhunt was sparked by the shooting death of a sheriff's deputy in the city of Sacramento. While on the run, the 34-year-old suspect opened fire on 2 more deputies, one of whom was killed. The World Health Organization has released its latest figures for the Ebola outbreak and says the total number of cases worldwide has now topped 10,000. Just 27 of those cases have occurred outside of the 3 worst-hit countries in West Africa. The most recent came in New York City, where a doctor has tested positive after returning from Guinea. That case has stoked fears in America's most populous city, enough so that the governors of New York and New Jersey have now ordered a mandatory 21-day quarantine of all medical workers and any airline passenger who has come into contact with victims of the virus. A healthcare worker in New Jersey who returned home on Friday after treating Ebola patients in West Africa was the first to be quarantined under the order. She developed a fever shortly thereafter, but a preliminary test for Ebola has come back negative. 2 separate attacks in the Sinai Peninsula have killed at least 30 Egyptian soldiers, the deadliest assault on the country's military in decades. Egyptian officials said Friday it was a well-planned attack that started with a car bomb, assumed to have been set off by a suicide attacker. While it's not been confirmed, officials are blaming the country's most active militant group, known as the Champions of Jerusalem. Egypt's National Defense Council declared a 3-month state of emergency in areas near the Sinai Peninsula and ordered a 3-hour curfew starting Saturday. Now, if you've ever eaten Korean street food, you've no doubt tried amuk, or fish cakes. They are most popular when the weather turns cold, as it is now, when the inviting warmth of a food truck lures hungry customers in. Now, there's a new spin on amuk, taking the southern port city of Busan by storm. Our Son Jung-in takes a look.
It could be mistaken for a bakery with its fancy interior, but this is an amuk store in Busan that is popular in the city, already famous for its delicious fish cakes. Customers are busy making their selections from rows of amuk in cookie-like shapes, colors, and sizes displayed nicely in baskets. This so-called Omuk bakery also gives buyers the opportunity to learn and make their own homemade fish cakes.
On weekends or holidays, we sell around 10,000 Omuk croquettes and serve about 2,000 to 3,000 shoppers a day.
This other Omuk store offers unique fish cake menus ranging from hamburger and sushi to noodles. Its coffee shop-like interior design makes for an inviting atmosphere for people who are looking for something special to try. This strategic approach has helped this new Omuk trend hit the streets in Busan by transforming cheap street food into a high-quality dish. A local department store aware of this growing trend set aside a room for an Omuk store, and its sales, they say, are exceeding expectations.
This Omuk store opened just a month ago, and it is surprising to see how popular it has become among shoppers.
Omuk is taking a new step forward to refashion itself as a luxurious food that people can taste in the convenient and pleasant atmosphere of a cafe or bakery. 손정인, 아리랑 뉴스.
Finally, leaving you with the weather. It was a warm and sunny day here in the nation's capital, but temperatures are already starting to dip here in Seoul. The overnight low will be 12 degrees, but will warm back up on Sunday with highs in the low 20s, although with a slight chance of showers in the afternoon for some regions. Let's take a look at the weather conditions in your part of the world. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. For more, don't forget to check out our smartphone application or head over to our website, arirang.co.kr/news. Thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your weekend.